Welcome, everybody, to the Popdoc podcast. I am your host, Dugan Bridges, and I'm so stoked to be interviewing the filmmaker of Unwarranted Influence, Janek Ambros. Janek, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Well, so one thing that I love about your film, about your documentary, is how it dives into information that you really would not find anywhere on mainstream media. So I personally believe that documentaries have become the new source of the next generation for the most part. And so it's really films like yours that get me so excited, where there's been a lot of thought put into the information you're going to display to everybody. And you're also gathering info that, like I said, you're not going to find on your big news channels, or if you do, it's just a whisper. So maybe tell me a little bit about that and your intention.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, I made the film quite some time ago, and what the main intent was is definitely kind of showing this more broader view of the military-industrial complex and American imperialism more generally. It was kind of a reminder to kind of show people how other countries might see us, and I think to your point, it was especially clear where the Beltway media wouldn't kind of dig into some of our foreign policy, because I think once President Obama did come in, I think Democrats have an inclination to become a little bit more hawkish when they get elected. So they kind of run on these, most politicians, even George Bush ran on an anti-war, like a more non-interventionist agenda in 2000 before 9/11. So you have this, and then for when a Democrat comes into office, they basically a lot of the times will suddenly become a little bit more hawkish. They'll work more with the foreign intelligence committees. They'll work more with the intelligence committees more across the board. And I think because of that, you'll have the Beltway media not really criticizing, because their president's in the White House, and then something like Fox isn't going to criticize Obama from the left. So yeah. I think that's kind of where, for me, kind of the frustration of not hearing or talking about these things was something I wanted to kind of go about and make.
What do you think happened to all those people that were so strong about the anti-war left? That once Obama came in office, it just like utterly disappeared and never came back. What do you think happened with that?
Well, I think it's mostly due to the fact that you have an exhausted American public with the Bush administration. And when, President Obama was on the campaign trail, he would talk about, civil liberties, getting us out of the war, all these things. But when they come in and, it, like I said earlier about kind of how they have this pressure from this more wider, Republicans even giving them pressure to maintain this hawkish foreign policy. But as constituents, as people, we kind of fall asleep at the wheel. I mean, our guys we trust. I mean, I think President Obama doesn't have this malicious intent in the way maybe something like Trump does. But that doesn't matter, because what it's doing is it's setting a precedent for the next president. So even if you trust your president, say, oh, I really like him, I think he's going to do these things, but I trust his intent. But we don't live it. He's not president for life. Someone else is going to replace him, someone you might not like. So I think part of the frustration for me was when I was making this is people were like, yeah, but Obama's in the White House. I think you're being too critical because we trust him, but it's almost irrelevant, because look who was elected next. I mean, nobody could have guessed that. So I find that to be interesting. But no, I think it's mostly just people kind of falling asleep at the wheel. Their guys in, they'll kind of let him do what he wants, because they're if anything, they're more inclined to defend him on other issues. So it's tough, and this is it's definitely a bipartisan. People talk about how there's so much gridlock in DC. This is a lot of these kind of things give a lot of bipartisan support.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot that you actually made this film back in 2014. So it was in the middle of the Obama administration that you were kind of reminding everybody with this film that we're still over there bombing, all these countries. So how do you feel like the political landscape is different now from back when you made this?
I'm glad you asked that because it's so different. I mean, it's like it's almost just it's stunning of how the political apparatus has changed since then. So when making this, it was a lot more simple. You basically had the in 2014 and really up until 2016, right, or 2015 when the election started. You basically had the Republicans were kind of run by the neoconservatives, right? The John McCains, the Bushes, those kind of dynasty families in the Republican Party, right? And then the Democratic Party, they brought in, President Obama, who, to be fair, was more of a reformer, not a big revolutionary, of course. And he ended up, it's more of a centrist president, right? So you kind of had the center controlling this apparatus of the government more broadly, right? And just the country more broadly. And that kind of made sense. Other countries understood it. They understood that the right was more hawkish on foreign policy and would want to get into, foreign adventures in the Mideast. And they understood the Democrats would do the same thing, but they kind of maybe had this more limited approach. And, we can get into that. But now you have a totally different thing because the neoconservatives of the Republican Party have kind of been ousted by Trump. And Trump isn't, and it's not like he's replacing it with some Dove foreign policy. And this is one of his greatest tricks. He's replacing it with the Steve Bannon project, which is something I'll get into in a second. But it's important to remember the neoconservative movement actually, started years ago, and they came from this more anti-Trotskyist point of view that Irving Kristol was a big kind of founding father of the conservative movement. And,
explain anti-Trotsky real quick.
A group of people that believed in this more, a great quote he said, Irving Kristol said, I think it was in the 90s, he said, the right wing fails to have big ideas. The left wing does. We need to learn from that. So they actually came from they were in part of the Democratic Party. Now, when McGovern, who was very anti-war, kind of changed all that, they basically moved from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. And they kind of put on these Texas boots and they moved to Texas and they started to placate to the red states. And they just easily maneuvered their way in. And then they changed their social issues. They didn't care about abortion or any of those things. That's not what any of this, their constituents, of course, do, and they placate to that.
Yeah.
So what I guess the point of that is that these kind of groups will shift to what's more advantageous. And right now, you're even seeing some of the more neoconservative types move and trying to align more with the Democrats because what's happening, excuse me, is, as I said earlier, there was this kind of, Republican neoconservatives, Democrat centrists. It was easy to understand. And then there was this progressive movement going on trying to blockade through it. But now we have this neo-fascist Trump era. That's kind of, and it's a little bit complex because it doesn't always run course with the neoconservatives in the military-industrial complex. But in many ways, it's not in many ways. It's actually worse. So he kind of, because what he does is this Trump ran on saying the Iraq war was a disaster. We should stay at home. We should keep our troops home. I mean, these are all just things that he says. There's no, there's things I can get into of what he's done and just.
So is that in the way that you feel like Trump was able to use these botched military disasters to his advantage when he was running?
He was very smart to do so. But he's a charlatan. I mean, he essentially. I can even just go over. Since he would go on the campaign trail, say, yeah, total disaster, especially when he was going against Jeb Bush, because he wanted to destroy the Bush dynasty. So, but meanwhile, Steve Bannon actually does kind of agree with who I see as more of this kind of puppet master to Trump, and he's doing a lot abroad. I mean, he's somebody who's going to be in the political arena for quite some time. He's a very, very I don't know what word to use for him, but
you said puppet master, so
yeah. So Yeah, he's a terrible human being. But so when he said he was this kind of let's stay at home, let's not go abroad. I mean, look, there's been a 250 increase in drone strikes the first year he arrived. There was, I think, more. There was in 2019. There was more bombings in Afghanistan than ever recorded since 2006. Because we don't, the military isn't always giving us the best information on that. The idea of him even in Afghanistan doing this deal with the Taliban is looked at in the Mideast as a total joke. I mean, I know people point to that and say, oh, he's getting us out. There's no end in sight still. The Iran deal is just, I mean, that alone would be enough to say that this is not the step in the right direction if you're interested at all in any kind of anti-interventionist policy. I mean, it's like I said, it's a total lie. It's this thing. It's something he tells his base. It's something he tells his base almost likes to pretend he's doing these things. And I mean, you also have sanctions with Iran that have killed, many people. Sanctions are not just a economic thing. That it really comes to it really does destroy life.
Yeah, it's economic warfare.
On Cuba, I mean, and then you have what was going on in Venezuela with Maduro and Guaido. He was basically in May trying to orchestrate a coup. You have sanctions on, and he's then funding the genocide of Yemen with the United Emirates. I mean, it's
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, so it's really disturbing because it's, in a way, he's done so much horrible things domestically that have caused all this kind of chaos that it's hard to even look at what he's doing abroad, especially now with the coronavirus. Everything's so hectic right now, election season. So by no measure is he some kind of let's stay at home, bring the troops home. There's no evidence to support this. He's just saying it, which is, okay, great. So, well, I mean, what is that exact? And it's interesting because what it means is it means that he's placating to some of the more intelligence committees, neoconservative movement. Yet at the same time, his goals are different than theirs, and his goals are worse because his goals are this kind of he still wants to be militarily engaged in these countries to protect American, interests and all that. But it's from a different lens. From the more centrist, neoconservative standpoint, there's some sort of ideology to it that I don't agree with, but one could argue kind of sustains this post-World War II world we live in. America will be everywhere. We're the world police force, etc. Right? Trump is looking at these things more narrowly, and it almost wants to dismantle the good parts of of what the neoconservatives and the more centrist Democrats want, which is more of working with the EU, working with our allies. That's something the Bannon Project is really against. It's this really more nationalistic approach. So I think sometimes people look at nationalism and in a weird way they kind of associate that, the right wing at least is base, think nationalism means, well, we're not going to get involved around the world. I mean, that's just a lie. Like, I mean, I listed all the things just right before this, and the list continues. And now we're getting closer to a situation with China, which is the Steve Bannon Project's ultimate, agenda. People want to talk about how Bannon has this kind of let's stay at home, bring the troops home. I mean, I think he was on Squawk Box on CNBC, and they just let him. He just started rave like a lunatic about China. And I got to say, I've worked a lot on the Uyghur issue in China. And
interesting.
Yeah, so there's a massive human rights situation in China where there's millions of people in concentration camps. I mean, it's a horrible thing. Yet at the same time, that's not what they're interested in about. When have Republicans cared about, oppressed Muslims? I mean, it's almost like a, I mean, that's
sorry, yeah.
Now they're beating the war drums for something like China, which is just obviously an existential threat. I mean, there's no other way to put it like that. So yeah, I mean, he definitely used the botched war efforts to his advantage, like most presidents, but somehow kind of tricks his base into thinking that we're not doing anything abroad, and that's nonsense. I mean, we have just the opposite. We have mass amounts of evidence supporting that he's continuing all this, making it worse, increasing what we're doing abroad, and in a much more nefarious way without much of a plan.
Well, let me ask you one quick question before I want to pivot to some filmmaker questions for you. But do you feel like there's going to be authoritarian rule in this country?
Yeah, I mean, I think in many respects we've already set, like, in many respects we've set up during the Bush and Obama administration. We've built up the executive branch so much that there aren't a lot of checks and balances. I mean, we're still using the same authorization to use military force that we signed in 2001 to continue to bomb other countries. So at one point, even I think it was in Syria. I mean, there's a lot of examples, but in the AUMF in 2001, it says that we can go after Al-Qaeda and its affiliates. And we've used that, like, I think it's like a one-page piece of paper signed in 2001, or 2002. I think there's two different ones.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, and we're still using it, and to the point where we're actually using it to justify fighting Al-Qaeda's enemies. So in the paper, it says people who did 9/11, Al-Qaeda, and its affiliates. So we've used that piece of paper so much that we're even using that phrasing to use it to say we're fighting Al-Qaeda's enemies. So how can you? It's Congress needs to reinstall that, or reissue that and update it. And they've tried several times, but they haven't done that. So
okay.
So there's that, but the authoritative rule domestically is a huge issue, and I think in many ways it's more pressing because right now you have a situation where the military and the more centrism and all that stuff, they really did come at odds with Trump when he started to say we need to implement the Insurrection Act and go against protesters a few months ago. That's a really big deal, and it's something that was I think the American people very felt it, and I think they eventually stood down, and the military even disagreed with it, which is great. I'm glad Mad Dog Mattis wrote his letter or whatever, but I mean and that's good. But I mean it's really bad because basically what Bush and Obama and pretty much most politicians involved in the Foreign Intelligence Committee have done is make this word terrorism a very broad use. So now we can use it even at home. And unfortunately, because of what you're seeing, these great uprisings for Black Lives Matter, these just amazing, incredible movements from the youth and all these things. I was fortunate enough to go to many of these protests. You're seeing them use now, and this is something I suspected a while ago after Ferguson, and I guess it didn't happen as much then, but you're starting to now really see the word terrorism with the Black Lives Matter movement, and that's very, very, very dangerous because the word terrorism is used so broadly. They can spin it to anything they want, and if this is the new thing they want to do, especially in an election year, that really worries me. So I think the authoritative that's already here, and we'll see what happens in November. That also makes me, I think a lot of people are getting concerned. He's already talked about moving the election day. That's never happened. Even Republicans went against him on that. So it doesn't even make sense for him either because all his voters are older. So they're going to want to mail in. So he's just obviously just spewing nonsense. But no, he's absolutely a massive, incredible threat. And as much as I, have critiques on the Democratic Party and Biden and all that, it doesn't matter. I mean, we need to kind of have a coalition of centrists and progressives and even these never Trumpers. If they wanted to help join and get Biden in and get Trump out, that's fine. I mean, I don't know how serious they are. They always say they're not gonna vote Trump, but they never seem to endorse the other candidate. So I don't know what the point of them doing that is. But hey, if we need anybody we can to defeat this. So in a weird way, progressives and people who are maybe more on the anti-war side, in a weird way, I think should ally themselves for now with Biden and Harris and get Trump out, because we just don't know what will happen if he stays in, because there's just no clear plan, and it's just, he alludes to a lot of authoritative measures. I'll say that.
But we only have 5 minutes left, so I want to get in a few filmmaker questions as well.
Okay, yeah.
From watching your film, absolutely loved it. It was, around 10 minutes, and to me, there was a couple things. Like watching it almost felt like a trailer to a movie or a feature film. And because even though it was 10 minutes, there was music and the cameos of different people, past presidents speaking. I believe there was a JFK voiceover. There was constant footage just moving over the film. Um, yeah. What was that about? Why the fast pace and is
Oh,
it part
yeah.
of something bigger? Is there a feature linked to this?
Yeah, so I ended up making a feature after this called Imminent Threat. But actually that wasn't the purpose. The purpose is I really just kind of wanted to do this stream of conscious editing. I'm heavily influenced by Thelma Schoonmaker, which is Scorsese's editor, and Craig McKay, who was fortunate enough to kind of help me a little bit. He cut the movie Reds. He worked a lot with Dede Allen, kind of the master of the jump cut. I'm really into editing. I didn't have any money to make this movie, so I basically took stock footage and archivals and resources and kind of that to make it. So I only had footage to edit. I didn't have any money, so that's why I did it like that. But then the editing comes from this kind of Sergei Eisenstein is another big influence in my editing, where it's almost stream of conscious editing, and it's kind of avant-garde, for lack of a better word, type of editing. Yeah.
Is the feature film like that as well?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I had some money for that one, so it's a little different. But
okay. So let me ask you about with editing. I mean, so I watched this and see all of the stock footage in it, and to me, I think like, where do you find all these pictures from World War II to Vietnam, and beyond? Like, how long does it take to find those archives and harvest it?
A long time. I have terabytes of stock footage. Terabytes.
Okay, and how did you find like the places to get the stock footage?
It would just go on, like, when the way you surf the web, it's almost just like you spend a couple days and you just keep Googling things, and you kind of what I do is I write out the documentary, and then I'll look at what I wrote and say I need to find this.
And what was all that stock footage free? Because you said you had no money to make this.
Yeah, and fair use is a thing that young filmmakers should definitely take advantage of, or anybody should. I mean, that's,
Explain that a little bit for the audience. Fair use for documentary filmmaking. Fair use,
and I recommend Donaldson and Califf. They're a great law firm. I use them for my feature film, not this one. Fair use is basically saying, hey, as long as you're saying a point, you can use this, and that sounds crazy, but it's true. I remember making the film and I was like, I can do that. And so you CNN clips, all that stuff. They can't really do anything. There's a lot. That's a great part of the free speech in this country. People should utilize it more.
And so, how are you able to navigate making this short doc into getting to do the feature?
Well, I just knew that I was able to use a lot of stock footage, and then I went off and went to a few political conferences and interviewed like the ACLU and other kind of organizations, and then I would just blend the interviews with a lot of stylistic stock footage and editing.
So the short doc didn't help you raise any money for the
No,
feature?
I just did that. I did that as a standalone thing, and that was fine. But then I went with the feature. Yeah.
And did the feature get picked up anywhere? What ended up?
Yeah, it's available. It's available everywhere. James Cromwell, the great activist and actor who played the farmer in Babe. He's a great guy. Jamie executive produced the film, so he kind of put his name on it, which helped get it out there, and it sold, and it's available on Amazon Prime and all that. It's called Imminent Threat. There's one thing, because it's related to related to the film. I actually spoke somewhat recently to Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. He was Colin Powell's chief of staff. And he said something interesting. So I think this is important, because I think a lot of these people who are never Trumpers that are, it's like I said, it's good to have in our alliance, like these David Frums and these Republicans and all that kind of stuff who say they're against Trump. But this is what he had to say about them. He goes, Trump is a product of the GOP. My party produced him as surely as rain grows flowers. The racism, the ignorance, the arrogance, the sheer stupidity of the ultra-right wing nursed over the past 50 years by the oh-so-clever politicians like Trent Lott, Mitch McConnell, John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Jeff Sessions, Richard Shelby, Jesse Helms, etc., has come home to roost in the badly codified hair of Donald Trump. And what he's saying by that great damning statement is that the Republicans who are like, oh my God, what do we do with this mess? 50 years of neglecting the working class and doing racist dog whistles, not even dog whistles, to their base to propel racism, propel all these things, have manifested itself into probably the most dangerous president we've ever had, who's now saying he's going to push elections and was even entertaining the idea of being in power. Maybe we'll be somebody should be in power forever. So I just want to make that clear, because there's a lot of people that we should take in some of these allies now, but remember how we got here. And Trump didn't just magically appear. He came from policies and neglecting the working class, and and all the things that Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson said. So.
Okay, so to sign off here, tell us what you have on tap next, where people can find you, how they can get involved with what you're doing.
Yeah, so I run with my colleagues Assembly Line Entertainment. You can follow us on Instagram at Assembly Line Ent, and we have a lot of films going on. I just made another feature film, a narrative psychedelic kind of comedy that's kind of this counterculture fun movie with my buddy Chris Blim at Good Hammer TV. We just had a movie at TIFF that called Human Capital. That's pretty cool. That starred Maya Hawke and Marissa Tomei and Liev Schreiber. And that's kind of this cool kind of look at classism and stuff, and kind of that kind of thing. So there's a lot of interesting projects. We usually try to keep it a little edgy and political, and sometimes it doesn't, that might hurt us, but I don't know, whatever. But gotta keep it political, and gotta keep it keep the conversations going, the important conversations going, because we're dealing with a lot as a country right now. So.
Yeah, that's a big part of art, is to be able to help I feel like everybody to process what's going on in the real world, and hopefully a healthy way. So thank you for being a part of that, and thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. I appreciate it.